Kenneth Edward Dank. Father of two, Kenneth Edward Dank left a Minnesota bar on a cold winter night in 1971 and was never seen again. The 28-year-old, who worked as an insurance adjuster, had just quit his job and was last seen leaving Ralph's Corner Bar in Moorhead on foot in early December. From what anyone could tell, he was simply on his way home, but he never made it there, sparking a mystery that remains unsolved more than a half-century later. Temperatures were well below freezing when Kenneth vanished, but because his body was never found, the possibility that he froze to death was quickly ruled out by his loved ones. At the same time, taxi drivers were unable to identify Kenneth as one of their customers, ruling out the likelihood that he took a cab home. And, according to his wife, the pair didn't have any marital issues. He also loved his kids deeply, so it was unlikely that he engineered his own disappearance and started a new life under a different identity. In the years following Kenneth's disappearance, the police released few details about the case, leaving a big fat question mark on what really happened to him. And while he's been declared legally dead by the court, he's still classified as a missing person. In early 2023, reporters from the Duluth News Tribune did their own digging and found some information that they believe sheds new light on the baffling case. A police report they obtained mentions the concerning possibility that Kenneth was targeted by disgruntled customers with ties to organized crime. The report also stated that he struggled to emotionally cope with denying claims to customers who he felt deserved to collect money, which is what prompted him to quit his job. The man's family members reportedly told the cops that Kenneth might have walked away from his job because he felt his family was in danger. One relative who asked to remain anonymous told the Tribune that Kenneth and his wife had received threatening phone calls in the weeks before he disappeared. They were so worried by the nature of the calls that they made plans to move out of state. There were also rumors that he'd upset members of a local motorcycle gang. Unfortunately, it seems as though all anyone can do for now is speculate on what likely happened to Kenneth. The case has since gone cold, but the local police department is still taking tips just in case anyone decides to come forward with new details that could help solve the mystery. 7. Mysterious druggings and deaths. At least 5 customers were fatally drugged with narcotics at LGBTQ-friendly bars in Manhattan over a several-month period starting in 2022. Police believe different criminal crews, working independently of one another, specifically targeted customers at gay bars. These organized groups use similar tactics, including stealthily slipping drugs into victims' drinks, causing them to fall unconscious, then robbing them of their phones, wallets, and other valuables. In some cases, the perpetrators drain the victims' bank accounts using their digital banking information. On St. Patrick's Day in 2022, a 29-year-old chef named Brian Shaffer was found dead on a sidewalk after leaving a bar where he'd celebrated the holiday. The following month, 25-year-old social worker Julio Ramirez died in a taxi after leaving a bar. Then, in May, a 33-year-old political consultant named John Umberger was found dead from an apparent drug overdose in a townhouse where he was staying during a visit from Washington, D.C. Surveillance footage from earlier that night showed a group of men holding him up at a club where he'd gone out drinking, and money was missing from his bank account. In July, 26-year-old Ardajan Berisha and a friend of his blacked out on the sidewalk after a night out drinking together. Sadly, Berisha didn't survive. Some victims who were lucky enough to wake up after being drugged and robbed came forward and reported the crimes. In late 2022, Bronx resident Kenwood Allen was charged in connection with the deaths of Sherpa and Berisha. He's accused of administering the highly dangerous drug fentanyl to the 2 victims, along with several others who survived. Unfortunately, the rest of the crimes remain unsolved, but the NYPD has made it clear that they're still working the cases and are determined to bring the rest of the perpetrators to justice. 6. Jessica Lally. During a night out with some friends in early 2022, 26-year-old bride-to-be Jessica Lally suffered a completely unexpected medical emergency. They were at an American-themed bar in Sheffield, England, when Jessica decided to try riding the mechanical bull. Like most people who give it a whirl, she eventually fell from the apparatus. But unlike most, she suffered a fatal heart attack during the fall. Paramedics tried to revive her, but they were unable to do so. Jessica didn't drink much before the deadly accident. According to her mum, Joan, who spoke with the UK Sun. The young woman and her pals had decided to stop in at the bar after having dinner elsewhere. She was working as a manager at a Pandora jewelry store and was engaged to get married when her life was abruptly cut short. However, the tragedy wasn't the mechanical bull's fault either. According to the bar manager, the bull was at its lowest speed when Jessica fell and went into cardiac arrest. He also said that she passed all the necessary safety checks that the bar requires before letting someone on the bull. At some point during the ride, she lost consciousness and slipped off. For a week following the tragedy, the bar closed so law enforcement could investigate and so employees could recover from the shock of the incident. A medical examiner concluded that Jessica's cause of death wasn't related to the bull. In the meantime, her friends and family members campaigned for more emergency defibrillators to be available in public places, which could potentially save lives in the future. They even set up a fundraiser to help pay for the equipment, which was extremely helpful to the community since there weren't many defibrillators around for emergency use. 5. Nicole Flanagan. 42-year-old Nicole Flanagan was working as an escort in New York City when she was found dead in 2021. She was naked and her body had been stuffed into a 55-gallon plastic drum. Her friend, Katrina Galloway, told the New York Post that the troubled woman had a great life until she made a series of wrong decisions. After graduating high school, Flanagan worked as a receptionist for a short period of time. The Greenwich, Connecticut native was always put together and looked nice, according to Galloway, who met Flanagan about 30 years before her death. But at some point, the attractive young woman reportedly diverted away from her path to success and began stripping at clubs in Brooklyn and Queens. Galloway said that Flanagan was never the same after that. Exotic dancing paved the way to escorting, and drugs and alcohol seemed to play a role in her inherently dangerous lifestyle. Flanagan also had 3 kids by 3 different men, the youngest of whom was only 6 or 7 years old when she mysteriously turned up dead. She was last seen alive outside a New York City apartment about a week before her remains were found in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. Authorities charged 29-year-old Akelia Barker with helping to move or conceal Flanagan's remains. Prison records show that Parker is serving a maximum 9-year sentence in connection with the case. He could be paroled by the end of 2023 or as late as 2029. Unfortunately, the exact details surrounding Flanagan's death and Parker's alleged involvement remain unclear. 4. Gangland kidnapping. In a mysterious missing persons case that can only be described as both bizarre and terrifying, 11 customers disappeared from an after-hours bar in Mexico City in mid-2013. Before they vanished, they were last seen at an establishment called Heaven in the upscale Zona Rosa district on May 26th. At least one reluctant witness reported seeing several individuals being crammed into SUVs by armed men in the morning daylight. Guadalupe Dominguez, a relative of one of the victims, told CNN that she heard the eyewitness account from a young man who escaped from the captors. However, authorities were quick to dismiss these claims, arguing that there was no evidence of any kidnappings occurring during the time the customers went missing. But they also didn't offer any better explanations for how nearly a dozen people vanished all at once. Because of this, the victims' loved ones quickly became frustrated with the lack of eyewitnesses who were willing to come forward. One rumor claimed that the bar's owner warned the people inside there that there was going to be a police operation. He turned the lights off and sent everyone outside, where the SUVs and armed abductors were allegedly waiting. Police denied conducting any operations outside the bar that day, but stuck to their story that there were no signs of a kidnapping taking place. And of course, the bar's surveillance cameras conveniently weren't working that day. A little over a month later, 13 human bodies, including several of the kidnapping victims, were found in a mass grave at a ranch outside the city. Investigators determined that the abductions were likely gang-related and had something to do with a drug-related rivalry between 2 different groups. A few of the victims were related to known gangsters, but the police said they were unable to identify any connections between the gang members and the crime. The charred remains of one of the suspects, Dax Rodriguez Ledesma, were found around the same time that the victims' bodies were discovered. This was a shocking, but not necessarily uncommon case. According to the BBC, an estimated 70,000 people died in gang-related violence in Mexico in the 6 years leading up to the mass kidnapping. And unfortunately, it's nothing new for people to go missing in Mexico. However, this case seemed to get a lot of publicity for the sheer number of people who vanished all at one time, and for the suspicious circumstances surrounding their disappearances. 3. The disappearance of Brian Shaffer. To celebrate the first night of spring break in 2006, 27-year-old medical school student Brian Shaffer went out bar hopping in Columbus, Ohio, with his roommate and some of his other friends. Toward the end of the night, they decided to return to a bar they'd been drinking at earlier, the Ugly Tuna Saloona, for a nightcap. The last known recording of the young man showed him speaking with 2 women outside the bar just before 2 a.m. He looked relaxed and nothing seemed amiss, and yet he vanished into thin air not too long after. He planned on proposing to his girlfriend Alexis Wagner during an upcoming trip to Miami, but she never heard from him again after that night out, and the trip obviously never happened. The final exchange between Alexis and Brian happened just hours before he disappeared, when he confirmed their travel plans and told his girlfriend that he loved her. After he went missing from outside the bar, his friends tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. He never returned to his apartment, and calls from his family went unanswered, and after that night, he was never seen again. When Brian missed his flight to Miami 2 days after he vanished, the police officially designated him as a missing person and began searching, unfortunately to no avail. A thorough investigation failed to turn up even a single sign of him beyond the surveillance footage from outside the Ugly Tuna Saloona. He remains missing to this day, leaving his loved ones to wonder how a night of blowing off steam after finals could end in such a mystifying tragedy. There's a $100,000 reward being offered to anyone who can help lead law enforcement to Brian's whereabouts, but so far nobody's provided any clues that could lead to his safe return. 2. Law student vanishes. 29-year-old law student Jordan Taylor vanished from a gay bar in Manhattan in early 2023 and has been missing ever since. He lived in Queens at the time and was last seen near his apartment on the afternoon of January the 6th. The young man left a barbershop in the middle of getting his hair cut and proceeded to the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan, according to his phone's data. His last known location was in Hell's Kitchen during the early morning hours of January 7th. The missing man's brother, Alton, told NBC that he thought it was weird when he noticed that Jordan spent 3 hours at the bus terminal. He assumed his brother was there to meet someone, but he didn't know for sure why Jordan was at Port Authority. His phone and wallet were found miles apart from one another in 2 different places in Manhattan several hours after he was reported missing. The phone appeared in Hell's Kitchen, not far from the bar he visited that night, while the wallet was found more than 3 miles away near the Goldman Sachs building in Battery Park City. Neither Jordan's friends nor his family have heard from him since the hours before he disappeared, leaving them extremely concerned. And while the first-year law student's loved ones are trying to hold out hope that he's alive, they've started to fear the worst. Apparently, it's completely unlike him not to reach out to them for a few days, let alone for more than a month. They're hoping a member of the public comes forward with information that'll help to bring him home safely. But for now, Jordan Taylor's disappearance remains a mystery. 1. The strange death of George Musser. 20-year-old college student George Musser didn't let the harsh winter weather stop him from going to a bar in Stillwater, Minnesota, the day before Christmas Eve in 2022. He was last seen alive at the establishment just outside the Minneapolis-St. Paul area at around 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve. At the time, temperatures were well below freezing, yet George didn't wear a jacket that evening. His wallet and keys were found outside near the bar, but nobody could figure out where he went. And their concern only grew as an Arctic blast blew through the region, reminding them that he couldn't possibly survive for long outdoors. Sadly, he was found dead at around 7 p.m. on Christmas Day in neighboring Baytown Township, 2 miles away from the bar he vanished from. According to the Washington County Sheriff's Office, surveillance footage showed someone matching George's description walking through the streets around the time he disappeared. Evidence suggested that he died from the cold weather, but it's unclear why he went wandering on foot in the blistering cold without proper outerwear. Would you rather be robbed of all your valuables but be left physically unharmed during a night out, or be the last person to see a bar patron alive before they went missing? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.